Gary Franchi here for the Reality Report. We have now with us in studio a very special guest, Richard Gage, who is a member of the American Institute of Architects. He's also the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gary. Great to be here today.
Now let's talk about Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. How did the organization begin, and what is its purpose?
Well, it began about 4 years ago when I heard on the radio David Ray Griffin, an author of about 9 books now on the subject of 9/11. And this was shocking to me. I'm on my way to a construction observation meeting, and I couldn't believe my ears. This is as somebody's explaining what happened at the Twin Towers that I knew nothing about. I thought it was just a gravitational collapse, according to the official story. And now I'm hearing that there's beams flying out of the towers and landing 600 feet away with molten metal pouring off the ends of them and so forth. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. So I did some research, put a presentation together. After that, took it to the 15 architects and engineers, architects that I worked for. They thought I was nuts until I showed them in this conference room with pizza that I had to bribe them to get them there. They all agreed with me afterwards, and they signed my petition, except for my boss, who was Middle Eastern. He was afraid to sign it. But that was it. That was our first 15 architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now we have 1,500. And virtually every architect and engineer who looks at this evidence is convinced. It's really amazing how overwhelmingly simple it is to understand, and people are shocked that they didn't hear about this from our government or media.
Now, one thing that the American people have not seen and know very little about is a building known as Building 7. Let's play that clip. Now, Richard, we just saw the collapse of Building 7. Could you explain what we just saw?
Exactly. Because it's mind-boggling. We've all seen this before. What is it? It's exactly like, in fact, it looks like those old hotels in Las Vegas that fall uniformly, symmetrically, straight down into their own footprints, and where the total structure is dismembered, and it collapses, therefore, like a house of cards. It's broken up and ready for loading and shipment. Now, we're told by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that this building, 7 years later, by the way, this building came down due to normal office fires in a new phenomenon never before heard called thermal expansion.
Well, now this building was not hit by a plane, right?
Right. And it came down about 5:20 in the afternoon of 9/11. It is part of the World Trade Center disaster, clearly, by any definition. It's part of the conspiracy, if you will, of the destruction of the World Trade Center. So it has to be understood in that context. Now, everybody knows who sees this building that it's a controlled demolition. It doesn't take rocket science to realize that a free-falling building, it can't destroy 40,000 tons of structural framework in it that's 5 times stronger than it needed to be to keep that building up.
Now, what would be required to dismember a building in that capacity?
Well, since it's free-falling, they would have to remove, synchronistically timed, the structural columns on each floor all at once, or at least virtually simultaneously. Fire doesn't have this precision. A controlled demolition with explosives is the answer as to how this can happen. And there's evidence of these incendiaries in this case.
What type of incendiaries would most likely be used?
Well, we're talking about thermite, because there's several tons of molten metal found underneath all 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers, by the way. This turns out to be molten iron. Molten iron is documented by FEMA in the steel as well as the evaporation of the ends of these beams. Hot sulfur corrosion attacks. Sulfur is added to thermite to become thermate. It's much more effective. Thermite issues molten iron as its byproduct. FEMA documents molten iron and the ends of these beams, invading the grain boundaries, in fact, of the steel. So we have the documentation from FEMA, which NIST threw out and did not incorporate in their final report. So this is extremely important. All of this evidence is really quite clear, the way it adds up to become, to support the hypothesis of controlled demolition, which NIST never looked at. They said, oh, there would have been a huge bomb going off. Well, no, we're talking about incendiaries here. They don't have the loud bangs of C4 or RDX, typical high-energy explosives. They don't have the bright flashes. This is a deceptive controlled demolition.
Now, I understand that there has been some dust analyzed from the debris of the Twin Towers and Building 7. Could you talk to us a little bit about what was discovered in that dust?
Well, that dust is 30% concrete by the USGS, who analyzes it. And it's a fine, almost like talcum powder, laid throughout lower Manhattan in a 12-inch thick blanket in some areas. And it's being created in midair before the towers come down. Pulverized concrete, 90,000 tons of it, in the 110 floors that are missing down at the bottom of each of these twin towers. Not only that, 10,000 file cabinets, over 1,000 people there's no trace of whatsoever. And so, except for 700 bone fragments found that are about a half an inch long on top of the skyscraper. But in this dust, officials, USGS, finds billions of small microspheres of previously molten iron. That is also proof of temperatures sustained over 2,700 degrees. Now, jet fuel and office fires don't create those temperatures. They don't even create half those temperatures. So what are these small spheres of iron doing in all the World Trade Center dust? Well, if there was thousands of thermite cutter charges throughout the columns and beams in these buildings, under explosive conditions, it would be atomized, the liquid molten iron byproduct, and it would fall and cool as spheres with all of the dust. That's the only rational explanation for these spheres being in all the World Trade Center dust. Now, an international team of scientists also finds small red-gray chips in the dust. These turn out to be nanothermite composite explosives because there's extremely small particles.
So they've actually discovered, they've found in the dust the non-detonated explosive charges.
Yeah, well, we can call them incendiaries that are designed to be explosives because of the extremely small size, nanoscale aluminum oxide and iron oxide and aluminum powders that are intimately mixed and in the perfect proportion in these red-gray chips to become thermite. But because of their size, they can be engineered to become explosives.
Well, now being an architect yourself, you're traditionally building structures and designing structures. What is necessary, in what fashion would incendiary devices need to be positioned inside a building? How long does it take to place these incendiary devices inside a building? I mean, we're talking 110-story, 210-story buildings, and of course, Building 7. This is a mammoth situation. I mean, I just can't fathom what it would take. Talk to us about how the charges could have been placed.
Well, easily these were the largest controlled demolitions in history. The towers being a very explosive event, not a very controlled event actually at all, versus the implosion of World Trade Center 7. But it would take months.
So the first two towers were more explosive.
Oh yeah,
related.
98% of the debris, the core columns and perimeter columns are blown outside the footprint. You know, with again no floors found there, and very.
In Building 7, it was an implosion. The building caved in on itself.
Yeah, very classic controlled demolition using thermite in that case, and probably nanothermite which is a more explosive incendiary, which can be a contradiction in terms until you really understand and do some more research in this peer-reviewed paper, which documents the findings of this international team led by Niels Harrit into the nanothermite capabilities. It can become more explosive. It's set in an organic bed of iron, oxygen, silica, which can do the gas overpressure work. So that's very important. But to answer your other question,
How long does it take to put these things together? I mean, those buildings came down like that, like a snap of your finger. They were gone.
well, about a dozen seconds for the towers, and 6.5 seconds for Building 7. We're talking free fall in case of Building 7 and near free fall, 2/3 of free fall. That building's going faster and faster down. There's nothing, almost nothing, resisting it. There's 80,000 tons of structural steel. Now, how would they have gotten in there past all the occupants to plant those explosives? Well, in the elevator shafts, where there are no occupants above and below the elevator cabs, somebody could have planted those explosives, a team, a large team, acting over a period of months. And an elevator modernization would have given the perfect cover, and in fact that's exactly what we had in the Twin Towers, the largest elevator modernization in history. Now this is documented in 2000, March of 2000, Elevator World. And this would have given the perfect cover to plant these explosives.
March of 2000 is when the elevators were reconditioned?
For the 9 months prior to 9/11, those elevators were under modernization by Ace Elevator. So we want an investigation of Ace Elevator, who had 85 employees at the time the first jet hit, and they scattered. They left. It was a scandal. And USA Today documented this shortly after 9/11. They're supposed to stay around and help. They're experts in the delivery systems, the elevators, to help the first responders.
So where is Ace Elevator now?
Well, they went out of business shortly after that, and I understand they're back in business again.
Interesting, interesting. Now, let's talk about people getting active with Architects and Engineers. You have over 1,500 architects?
Yeah, indeed. And we're growing rapidly, and others are helping us too. We do have action groups. We're over 24 now, and we're growing to 200 to 300 action groups all across the country, where local 9/11 truth groups can affiliate with us just by going to Take Action on our website, which is ae911truth.org. Take action, join an action group. We'll put their website and email address on our website, and then people can call them locally and all across the country and around the world. And we'll coordinate. Every month we're on a conference call, and we coordinate local action, so we're all doing the same thing in concert, which can be very powerful.
What is the overall public response? I know you've gone on several tours around the country. What is the overall response from people hearing your presentation?
Well, it certainly ranges. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a very positive response to the evidence itself. As far as the media, we have a tough time getting the mainstream media to show up to these events. Although we're doing a radio interview now about every day, and TV interviews once in a while, these are not big mainstream national audiences. That's the gold prize. We were on Geraldo with one of our engineers, Tony Zambotti, and a family member, which was very helpful in November. We haven't had much follow-up yet.
Now, that was in relation to the Building What campaign.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, and this is an extraordinary effort by NYC CAN, New York City Coalition for Accountability Now. The Remember Building 7 project puts $100,000 worth of TV ads to the New York public in an effort to educate them and the City Council that Building 7 does, in fact, come down in the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition. It requires a reinvestigation of it because we're told it came down by fire. And so this effort is ongoing and extremely important.
All right, folks, that was Richard Gage. Take action with him at ae911truth.org. We'll see you again.